Oh howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Today I wanted to put out a video on The Adorned, one of the most important unique items in PathOfExile's current endgame. This is a fairly recent addition to the game, and it certainly shook things up a lot when it was added. So, what's The Adorned, why would you want to use it, how do you get it, and why is it so good? Let's discuss. But just first, this video is going to be me bringing back and rebooting an old series I did about 3 years ago on this channel. So back in 2021, I put together a series on Endgame Unique Items. Most of this doesn't really hold up today. PathOfExile's meta evolves a lot. Some of the items that were discussed in that series, like Cinderswallow ended up getting nerfed. Some of the items that were discussed in that series, like the Eternity Shroud, haven't been nerfed, but they've just fallen completely behind the power creep in PathOfExile. And they've gone from being things people were interested in building around to just curiosities that no one really pays much attention to. So those videos, while they're still online, they don't really have all that much to offer today. What this revival is going to do is bring it up to date a bit and take a look at three main categories of endgame unique items. The first one will be things like the Adorned, that are central to the PathOfExile meta. The second category will be really niche items, things like Perseverance that are extremely good in one build, but that don't have much widespread appeal beyond that. The third category will be items with unexplored potential. These will be items that look like they're just missing one piece to be really good. A good example of the third category, Kitava's Thirst is really popular this league, but last league it would have fit this category. It was an item that did something impressive and powerful, but that didn't really have a home because the right pieces to make it into a powerful build weren't quite all there together. This league, however, is one of the most popular unique helmets in the game. So those are the three different categories of uniques that we'll be covering in this series. Anyways, let's break down the wording on the Adorned. The wording that's given by Grinding Gear Games is extremely precise here because they want to include some things and they want to exclude others. 50 to 150% increased effect of dual socket passive skills containing corrupted magic jewels. So the first thing to note is that this is dual sockets, but they also have to be passive skills. So this means that jewels that are socketed in other places, for example in a stygian vice, these are not going to be affected by the Adorned. Keep that one in mind, it's very important. Additionally, it's very carefully worded to have poor interactions with cluster jewels. Not completely worthless, but pretty close to it. So the wording here says that it is only the jewel socket's passive skills that are increased. Most of the character power from a cluster jewel isn't actually from the cluster jewel itself, it's from the additional sockets that cluster jewel adds to your passive tree. For example, if you have a really good introspection jewel, then that jewel is going to add introspection onto your tree, and it's also going to add at least one, potentially more, nodes that have 6 to 8% mana reservation efficiency. But these nodes are not going to be a part of a dual socket passive skill. As a result, they're not going to end up being boosted by the Adorned. What will be boosted by the Adorned is if this jewel happens to also have the implicit 2% mana reservation efficiency, and that's part of the jewel itself, that's a mod on the jewel, then that's something that is going to be boosted by the Adorned. For that reason, the Adorned does not work all that well with cluster jewels. Finally, it only works for jewels that are simultaneously magic rarity and corrupted, and it does scale up the implicits. In short, if you're using the Adorned on your character, you probably want to have a large number of magic abyss jewels and magic classic jewels, and by classic jewels I mean crimson, cobalt and viridian jewels, or in weird cases prismatic jewels. You're going to want to have a large number of these on your character, the more the merrier. It's also worth noting that the Adorned is an extreme RNG item. You'll notice the item has a wide roll range from 50% to 150%, and every whole number in that range is possible. So you can get 50%, 51%, 69%, 97%, 137%, or 150%, or anything in between. Any specific number you can dream up is 1 in 101 to roll. And because the Adorned is always spawned corrupted, you can't divine it if you're disappointed with the results, nor can you use the 3-for-1 vendor recipe on unique items. Rolls from 50% to 99% are, in my opinion at least, unusable trash. Generally speaking, your character will be stronger if you use rare jewels instead of using the Adorned and a bunch of magic jewels. For 100% and up though, there's a number of critical breakpoints where the item gets meaningfully better. To understand these, it's important to note the individual mods on the item round down. So let's talk about some of those critical breakpoints in power. It's worth noting that 150% Adorned is miles better than 149% one. However, it's also miles more expensive. At the time I'm recording this video, a 150% Adorned is between 1 and 1.2 mirrors of Calandra, where 149% one is about 0.3 mirrors. There is a huge power jump from 149% up to 150%. And that's because each of those individual numbers rounds down like we were talking about before. And so for instance, if you have jewels with 8% energy shield, then that becomes 20% with 150, but it's 19.92%, which rounds down to 19% if you have 149% Adorned. And there's a lot of mods that go up by 1 point going from 149 to 150. And remember that this is going to apply individually to every single one of your jewels, and you're probably going to be using at least 7 of them on a build that's using the Adorned. As a result, that breakpoint's huge, and it gets even more so when you remember there is a 2% mana reservation efficiency Vaal implicit that you can get, which goes up to 5% if you've got the perfect 150. Some of the other breakpoints to be aware of: 147% and also 140%, 134%, 127%, and so on. These are a breakpoint for all of the 15% critical strike multiplier jewel mods, and there's quite a lot of those, so that's something to keep in mind. 115%, 129%, and 143% are breakpoints for life. The 7% to life jewel mod scales up to 17% if your Adorned is 143 or better. It scales up to 16% if it's 129 or better, and it scales up to 15% if you've got 115% or better. So these are the key breakpoints for life. And finally for energy shield, 150% is the final breakpoint where 8% ES becomes 20%, 138% is where it becomes 19%, 125% is where it becomes 18%, and 113% is where it becomes 17%. Notice you can spend a very large amount of currency to get a small upgrade here. The biggest breakpoints in trade value are 150%, 143%, 138%, 129%, 125%, 120%, 115%, and the last breakpoint at 100%, below which the item is not valuable at all. And interestingly, 140% is not a big breakpoint, even though it is an additional point of crit multiplier for a number of builds. And it's also the last semi-affordable scaling boost to mana if you're scaling mana on your character. Now it's worth noting that trade data is based on 3.24, so if you're watching this later, then of course it may not quite be accurate. And additionally, it indicates leaps in demand, but it does not indicate that the higher tiers are actually meaningfully better for your build. For example, if you scale Energy Shield, there is just no difference between 142% Adorned and 143% Adorned on your build, whereas if you scale Life, that is a very big jump indeed. So let's quickly discuss why this item is so good. Jewels in PathOfExile are balanced around having 4 mods, and maybe having a Vaal implicit on top of that. If you've got 3 excellent mods on a jewel and 1 additional mod that's quite good, that's a decent jewel, and it's hard to roll those. And it's harder still to roll them to have perfect numerical values of each of those mods. Contrast this to how easy it is to roll 2 mod magic items that are absolutely perfect. Maybe absolutely perfect for you, but maybe they're not perfect for you, but they're perfect for someone else. Additionally, you can get them perfectly rolled and perfectly divined, and you've got a reasonably good chance of it surviving its interaction with the Vaal orb in order to make it corrupted, and potentially that might even give you a desirable implicit on top. If you do source magic jewels that have 2 perfect mods on them and that have a useful implicit, and you've got 150% Adorned, well, that's like having 5 perfect mods on your item, but additionally having 2.5 Vaal implicits on top of that. You can see how this really adds up across your entire character when you start getting 6 or 7 of these jewels, and the Adorned is scaling them so much. But it's not just the ability to go from 3.5 mods and a Vaal implicit to 5 perfectly divine mods and 2.5 Vaal implicits. The other thing about the Adorned is that some mods are just better than others for your build, and you don't need to compromise here. You can just get the very, very, very best ones with the Adorned, and that's why it is such a powerful item. Now, there are methods to scale to the moon with the Adorned. Synthesized jewels offer peak min-maxing potential with a well-rolled version of the Adorned, particularly in patch 3.24. The new Black Morrigan beast, in conjunction with the old favourite Craicic Chimeral, the imprint beast, allow you to apply the effect of a Hinekora's lock onto an item. That item has to be magic, otherwise it doesn't work, but we're talking about Adorned jewels, so of course it's magic. You can do this before you apply a Vaal orb in order to corrupt it, and that gives you the ability to fish for the perfect corruption. Doing this is not at all cheap, and it should only be done on the very, 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 very best of Adorned jewels. Okay, so you've decided you want to get the Adorned. How do you get it? Well, let's talk firstly about the original way. This item is created by combining 4 different pieces, each of which comes from a different Vaal-themed boss. If you're playing in Trade League, Curiosity is the expensive one. That's because there's a few less of them in circulation, and beauty, cooperation, and ambition end up just being oversupplied, and people keep undercutting each other on those to try and get rid of them, whereas curiosity is the one that everyone wants in order to finish their set. Really, it's the same dynamic as why Mortal Ignorance is the most expensive piece for accessing Uber Atzuri. Even though Mortal Hope is the rarest to get as a drop, Mortal Hope has a massive supply from divination cards, and that means that Mortal Ignorance is the one that is short supplied across the whole Trade League economy. The first piece you're going to need is called Beauty. This is an uncommon drop from Uber Atzuri. The second piece you'll need is called Cooperation. This is a rare drop from the boss of the Vaal Temple. Now there are 3 bosses in Vaal Temple: Kaj Ili, Kaj Yoraz, and Kaj something else. It is Kaj Ili who is the really rippy one. She's the one that drops the Cooperation Vaal aspect. There is Ambition. This rarely drops from the Vaal Omnitect, the boss of the Temple of Atsuatl. You must be monster level 80 plus in order for this to drop. Finally, there is Curiosity. This is a common drop. Despite being the most valuable, it is also the most common of these to drop, but it comes from a rare boss, and this is Ahuatotli the Blind, who is found in Vaal cities in the Delve Mines. If you're playing in Trade League and you happen to get one of these, at the time I'm recording this video, the Curiosity aspect sells for about 15 to 18 Divine Orbs depending upon the time of day. But there are other ways to get the Adorned. Firstly, there is a divination card called the Mad King. This drops from regular monsters in the Reef map as well as 3 other tile sets. This card's rarity is unknown. I'm not aware of any large-scale testing that's been done on how rare this card is. It's not staggeringly rare though. It's certainly not like the Apothecary, and I'm interested in doing some future testing on this. Anyways, turning in a set of these cards will award you an ultimatum aspect with an unexpected weighting. This is heavily biased against Curiosity and Ambition, but interestingly, the Uber Atzuri and Vaal Temple fragments are very common from this divination card set. This is quite interesting as Uber Atzuri is probably the hardest of these bosses to defeat, and her fragment is very common from the Mad King. So this one's important to keep in mind. The second alternate way of getting it is using the Atlas Keystone Lucid Dreams, which is the one that allows you to modify Vaal areas. It stops them from being corrupted by default, so that you can then apply currency to them. Now there's 2 ways that you can modify Vaal areas to get unique areas. Firstly, there's a way you don't want to do, and that is scour chancing them. This is a miserable experience, it's not fun, it will make you hate PathOfExile, and it does not have very good results. It seems like it takes about 300 scour chances on average in order to get one of the unique Vaal areas, and most of those unique Vaal areas are not ones you want to do. However, you can Vaal Orb these Vaal areas, and when you do that, it seems like it's about a 4 to 8% chance for them to turn into one of the 3 different unique Vaal side areas. Once you have applied a Vaal Orb to it though, you can't modify it further. So you either run it or you run away from it. Now there are 3 Vaal side areas that are unique. The first one of them is called Endless Nightmare. This is by far the most common of them, and I would estimate that it is 3/4 of Vaal side areas that you're going to get that are unique. This one is bad, it's probably not worth running, except just once to say that you've done it. However, the other 2 are special. One of them is called Grand Dreams. This has nothing to do with the Adorned, but it's really good. It will give you a Fractured Incursion modded item, and the Fractured mod will be the Incursion mod. These can be quite valuable if you get lucky with it, and by quite valuable I do mean very valuable. However, the one you're probably interested in is Bane of Chaos. You'll have to beat a ghosted Atzuri in order to beat this, so it's certainly no joke, although Atzuri will not have her usual split phases. If you do succeed in beating Atzuri in this, then you will receive an entire Adorned. No fragments required, it's just already pre-combined for you. Now sources disagree on how rare Bane of Chaos and Grand Dreams are relative to each other. I'm just going to say that I don't know at the moment. It seems like Bane of Chaos is not more common than Grand Dreams. They might be equal in rarity, but there's also other evidence that seems to imply maybe Grand Dreams is more common than Bane of Chaos. As for which of those it is, we flat out don't know, the sample sizes are too small. Anyways, the final words I wanted to leave with are the Adorned's impact on trade leagues. If you've ever wondered why Alteration Orbs are worth picking up at all, and why they're so expensive, if you wondered why people interact with Delve, and for that matter why everything else that comes out of Delve is so cheap this league, and if you're wondering why the unique Cluster Jewel Voices is so much more expensive than it's been historically, all of these things come down to just how good the Adorned is, how central it is to the meta, at least when it's well rolled. This item is probably one of the most powerful things in PathOfExile at the moment, because it lets you far surpass the normal power levels of jewels. Even though you're giving up an entire jewel socket in order to put it in, you still get so much out of it that it ends up being a really easy trade to make. Anyways, that's the Adorned. I'm going to leave it there. If you want to bias your YouTube recommendations in favor of seeing more videos from this series, then you know the deal. Subscribe to the channel. It's roughly a 300% more multiplier to how often my videos will show up in your feed. Or if you want to get nagged when a new video comes out, you can also click the bell. That choice, of course, is up to you. May your Vaal aspects combine in interesting ways.